Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to the Persistence in Prayer podcast hosted by Catholic mindset coach, wife, mother, educator, and speaker Kylie Hine. Kylie is passionate about helping you deepen your relationship with God through the power of prayer. This podcast is a space for high achievers who want to do it all, but also want to prioritize their spiritual life and grow in faith. Join us as we explore the beauty of persistence in prayer and the transformative impact it can have on our lives. Get ready to discover practical tips, insights, and inspiration to help you develop a daily prayer practice and cultivate a deeper sense of trust in God's plan for your life. Let's journey together towards a more fulfilled and faithful life as we invite the Holy Spirit in. Let's begin.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Persistence in Prayer. I'm Kylie, and I am your host. If you have ever found yourself wondering, what does God want from me? What does He want from me in this moment? What does He want from me in my life? What does He want for me in my family situation? Then I want you to stick around because we are going to talk about discernment. Now, if you're thinking, Kylie, that is a big word. I don't even know what that means. Don't check out just yet. I'm going to walk you through all of it. And as we are going to be talking about Saint Ignatius of Loyola today and discernment, I have a couple of really great opportunities I want to make sure that I share with you. The first is if you have not downloaded your freebie on the Ignatian Daily Examen by Temperament, that is my version of the Daily Examen catered to each temperament, choleric, sanguine, melancholic, and phlegmatic, then I really want to encourage you to go to www.kyliemhine.com or click the link in the notes and go get your freebie. This is an excellent way to reflect on your day, to help you grow in self-awareness, and also start to understand where God is calling you. I'm going to deep dive into this a lot more throughout this episode, but I just wanted to share that with you. If you haven't checked it out yet, go download it right now. One of my clients that I worked with for 4 weeks, discovering her plan of life and implementing it, she uses this examen. And one of the things that she wrote to me was, I've often struggled to prioritize intimacy with God, even as I've come to go about doing church ministry and caring for my family in His name. I knew I wanted to develop more disciplined prayer practices, and so when I read about Kylie's Plan of Life program, I knew it was for me. Kylie helps me implement specific and life-giving prayer routines based on my unique desires, temperament, and state in life. When obstacles like inconsistent schedules and the needs of my small kids arose in pursuit of these goals, Kylie coached me through my mind drama with kindness and competence. I honestly can't imagine going back to the way my prayer life was before Kylie's program. I am so grateful for her yes to the Lord in creating it. Again, this daily examen is part of the plan of life that I help individuals develop and implement and stick to as they are creating those prayer habits. And the two pillars that I always talk about, again, are daily mental prayer in the morning, and then in the afternoon or the evening is the daily examen. Okay, let's jump into something called discernment of spirits. Now, before I get too far here, I want to tell you a little bit about the individual that we often refer back to when we are discussing discernment of spirits. Discernment of spirits is often related back to Saint Ignatius of Loyola. I remember when I was working through my ministry program, I was getting my master's and I was at a Jesuit university. So the name Saint Ignatius came up quite frequently. However, I really didn't know a lot about Saint Ignatius. I knew that he was big on recognizing God in all things. I knew that he was the founder of the Jesuits, but I didn't really know anything about his life. It wasn't until I was about to graduate, I was sitting outside the Vice Provost of Religious Studies office in preparation for a meeting I was to have with her as I was taking an independent study course. And sitting next to me was a pamphlet on the life of Saint Ignatius of Loyola. and I became fascinated. Saint Ignatius was born in Spain. He died in 1556, but was born in 1491. He is a mystic. He is the founder of the Society of Jesus. And he has some controversy these days because the Jesuits sometimes get a lot of shade thrown their way. But I want to tell you, if someone is looking on discernments or how to make decisions in their life or are wondering where God is calling them, people are going to refer you back to Saint Ignatius, even though he is not one of the doctors of the church. Saint Ignatius was the youngest of 13 children. His mother died at the age of 7, and then as time went on, he became a knight. So he was all about the gallantry and this life of being a knight. At one point, he was hit by a cannonball. He had a severe fracture to his right leg, some damage on his left leg, and this was kind of the end of that chapter of his life. This life of vanity where he was all about delight and women. He was not living a good and moral life. So as St. Ignatius is recovering from this cannonball wound, he begins to learn about the saints. This is one of my favorite parts of the whole story. So St. Ignatius is recovering from his wounds in a castle. And as the story goes, in this entire castle, there are only 2 books. One on Christ and on the life of the saints. So St. Ignatius, this valiant knight who daydreams about being high in the military, he dreams about romance and chivalry and worldly endeavors, but he has these 2 books. And so what happens is he's reading about the saints, and he noticed that he spends some time daydreaming about these worldly things. But sometimes his mind would also go to imagining what it would like to live as a saint. And what he notices is that through both of these thoughts or these daydreams, while he's thinking about them, he is excited. But there's a difference. One of them leaves him feeling sad and dry and uninspired later on in the day. And the other one has this lasting enthusiasm and inspiration long after his daydream has ended. And it is this conversion and intensification of spiritual awareness that eventually leads to the spiritual exercises. So Ignatius recovers. He eventually makes a pilgrimage to the Holy Land and ends in a place called Manresa. So if you've ever heard of Manresa, Spain, this is often associated with Saint Ignatius. And he stays there from March 25th of 1522 until mid-February of 1523. And this deep conversion happens. He has long hours in prayer. He goes to daily mass. There's severe penance. He struggles with scruples. There's a lot of time in silence and solitude. There's a cave that he goes. He neglects his physical appearance, and he seeks to start beautifying his soul. Now, why does this matter to you? Well, the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius are such an incredibly powerful tool that he has left for us, that the Lord has given him to give to us, to help us understand how the Lord is working in our lives. How those small tugs on our heartstrings are pulling us toward God, or how the thoughts in our mind are pulling us away from God. So Ignatius's interior life was characterized by this remarkable spiritual self-awareness. This is something that we are all called to, and the spiritual awareness helps us to make better decisions about what we should be doing in the moment, in our day, and with our lives, in regard to our families, in regard to our workplace, all of those things. So Saint Ignatius of Loyola is essential. And it was me sitting outside waiting for a meeting with my professor that I really started to understand the life of Saint Ignatius and how incredible it was. So even though I had heard of Manresa, Spain, I had heard of Saint Ignatius, but I didn't really know anything about him. And his life is a a huge part of what makes these exercises so intriguing, in my opinion, because we get to see how he lived through these exercises and how they helped him to grow in holiness, and then the transformation that thousands have had or more through these spiritual exercises. So the spiritual exercises of Saint Ignatius are rather long, and a lot of times there will be priests or religious who will go on these long 30-day Ignatian silent retreats, and they will go through all of these exercises. There is also something called the 19th annotation exercises that can be used for lay people or for those who are not able to go do a full 30-day retreat. So I myself right now am working through the exercises with a spiritual director, meeting once a week. So not only am I utilizing the daily examine in my life now, but I'm getting to walk through these spiritual exercises. And also what I'm going to start talking to you about today as well are the 14 rules of discernment that Saint Ignatius leaves us with. Okay, so what is discernment? Father Timothy Gallagher is probably the most well-known speaker, podcast extraordinaire. He leads retreats. He is the most well-known on Saint Ignatius of Loyola and discernment of spirits. He has many books, and in his book, The Discernment of Spirits, an Ignatian Guide for Everyday Living, he defines discernment as the process of distinguishing one idea from another. The phrase of spirits describes what is to be discerned, that is, which spiritual realities are to be distinguished from one another. The word spirits, as St. Ignatius uses it in this context, indicates those affective stirrings in the heart: joy, sadness, hope, fear, peace, anxiety, and similar feelings with their related thoughts that influence our life, our faith, and our progress toward God. So essentially, it's this process by which we are starting to distinguish the different kinds of spiritual stirrings on our heart, those that are from God and those that are not, so that we can either choose to accept them or choose to reject them. Now, as a Catholic mindset coach, I love this kind of stuff. This is a lot of what I do in Catholic coaching, is helping clients to recognize what thoughts are leading to their emotions, which are leading to their actions, and then distinguishing if the fruits of those actions are good fruits or not, so that they can choose to either reject those thoughts or choose those thoughts and continue to follow them. So it's really similar to what St. Ignatius is teaching here about recognizing the stirrings of our heart and choosing to take every thought captive and accept or reject. So again, why does this matter? That same summer that I sat in that office learning about the life of St. Ignatius, I remember going outside and watching Sister Mary Ruth skip down a college campus street. And I thought to myself, I want that. This woman did not let the thoughts of anyone else ever cross her mind. She did not care that she was skipping down the street in her full habit. She did not care who was watching. She did not care who was judging. She was happy. There was a smile plastered across her face. And I remember thinking, I want that. I want to be able to be moved by whatever is going on in my heart and not have the fear of anyone else's opinion holding me back. I went on an 8-day silent retreat, and I remember bringing that image to mind and talking about it with my spiritual director. And he laughed and he said, that is because she is free. And that is what discernment of spirits gives us. It's freedom from discouragement and deception in our spiritual lives. It is the freedom to move forward without fear, because we are going to be convicted in where it is that God is calling us. I can speak about this freedom from my own personal life. That's not to say that I don't still struggle with fear or with the constant desire to pray for courage. But I can tell you that it is transformative. The self-awareness of where God is calling you and the freedom to follow without second guessing, to move in conviction, is so incredibly powerful that I am here on this podcast. I have left my job. I have left the security of what I was doing for 13 years. I have left the security of my friendships, of the community that I was surrounded by, for a new life, because that is what God is calling me to. And I often get asked, aren't you scared? Aren't you terrified? And I'd be lying if I said that those thoughts never crossed my mind, but I am so convicted in this because I have grown so much in self-awareness through these opportunities that the Lord offers, through these things like the spiritual exercises, like the 14 rules, like the daily examine that Saint Ignatius has offered us, and all of the other prayer practices that the other saints have given us too. Another saint, if you've listened to the podcast, you'll know you hear me talk about, is Saint Teresa of Avila or Saint John of the Cross. And so we have these incredible roadmaps and blueprints that we can utilize. And so it's about taking that step to actually use them. Now, I'm not going to get through all 14 rules. The actual rules, I believe, are only about 3.5 pages long if you just read the rules. But there is so much depth to them that if you just read them at a glance, you are not going to gain the value that is actually inside of these rules. So I'm just going to hit on a couple of my favorites, and then I'm going to talk to you at the end about how you can learn more if you want to learn more, and how you can utilize this to help you grow in spiritual self-awareness. So the first rule only applies to a certain subgroup of people. The first rule only applies to persons who are going from mortal sin to mortal sin. So if you're listening to this and you are not in a state of constant mortal sin or habitual mortal sin, then this rule will not apply to you. But I do want to state it because there was a point in my life where this was me, and I did not recognize that I was in a constant state of mortal sin because I had chosen to reject one particular Catholic teaching that I just didn't agree with. So I was trying to be 1 foot in and 1 foot out. And if you want to grow in your spiritual life, if you want to grow in holiness, if you really want to grow with God, you can't be half in and half out. You can't be lukewarm. You have to just make the jump and trust that it is going to be worth it. But if you are here, no judgment. I have been here. I lived here for a while. So if you are in a state of habitual mortal sin, or if you know someone who is in a state of habitual mortal sin, in this state, as the spirits are working within you, you are going to recognize that you are going to have a false sense of peace when you are sinning. Because the bad spirits, which I will define here in a second, the bad spirits are going to give you this false sensual delight and pleasure so that you continue to grow in that vice and continue to live in that vice and sin. Whereas the good spirits are going to kind of be like the pinpricks and like the biting in your conscience, telling you that this is bad, this is not where you want to be. But you're going to feel peace doing something that is wrong. Not a true peace, but like a false sense of peace. Okay, now when I'm talking about good spirits and bad spirits, good spirits, that is God. That is God working within you through the tugs on your heart, in your soul, the thoughts in your mind. It's the angels and archangels, all of those that are in union with God. It could even be talking to you through your priest or a loved one. The bad spirits are obviously the evil one, the fallen angels, sometimes called demons, or anything that is pulling you away from God and into sin. Okay, so this is the first rule. And again, it only applies to those who are going from mortal sin to mortal sin. The second rule on applies to everyone who is past that state. So anyone who is no longer in a state of mortal sin, or at least not habitual mortal sin. We're all still going to sin. We're all still going to make mistakes, but God is going to work within us a little bit differently in these times. So this is going to be the opposite of the first rule. And this is going to be like we're rising from good to better. If you have downloaded my daily examine, the acronym that I use for the temperaments examine is the word better, because we are starting our day at good and we are striving to become better. So the acronym that I use for the examine at the end of the day is the word better. And that's where this comes from. So we are striving to go from good to better in the service of God. And so now everything flips, because the evil spirits are going to be the ones that make us sad. They place obstacles. We have false sense of reason. We can feel discouraged, like we don't know what to do. We don't know how to move forward. Whereas the good spirits are going to bring us courage and strength. We might feel consolation, which is like being moved to tears, like a really profound sense of peace or joy, a sense of being inspired. And these things are going to help us move forward in doing good. Consolation is really just when we are so inflamed with the love of God. You are going to know when you're in consolation, because your heart is going to be full. And sometimes your heart might be so full that it overflows from your eyeballs. You might weep tears of joy. If you've ever been sitting in prayer and you are just moved to weep, it could even be like tears of sorrow, but sorrow at your sin. That is also consolation, because it is moving you toward holiness. It is inspiring you to grow closer to God or to repent. And so that's an important note to make. Not all tears are bad tears. Some tears are very, very good. So that is spiritual consolation. Now, spiritual consolation is different than just being happy. Things like really great music or a good workout, those can make us feel happy. You know, those endorphins can get kicking. That's not necessarily that's not spiritual consolation. Now, it could lead to spiritual consolation because we are so in awe at God's goodness. We're feeling really good, and so we're more appreciative of the things around us. We start to see God in the world around us and nature and the people around us. So it can lead to spiritual consolation, but in and of itself, just a good feeling is not spiritual consolation. That's something that's a little bit different. Okay, so I want to jump to rule number 5. This is the one that, if you remember no other rule, remember rule number 5. Okay, it is called a time for fidelity. Father Timothy Gallagher says that if you remember nothing else, remember rule 5, which is, in spiritual desolation, never make a change. I'm going to say that again. In spiritual desolation, never make a change. So if you're looking at your life saying, what does God want from me today? Where is he calling me? You have to ask yourself, am I in desolation? Because if you are in desolation, you are going to feel inclined to turn away from God, to not show up for your prayer practice, to not pray your rosary, to not go to Mass, whatever it happens to be. You are going to feel inclined to not do that. Spiritual desolation is also like maybe you had this really profound moment with God in adoration or in your morning prayer or at Mass after receiving the Eucharist. And desolation will creep in and make you feel like it's a figment of your imagination. Like, God doesn't really love me that much. That must have just been me imagining that this happened. It's feeling discouragement or that God is really distant and far. When I work with clients on developing a plan of life, this is one of the first questions that I ask them is, does God feel near to you or does he feel far? And then I have to kind of explain because it seems like an odd question if you're not familiar with discernment of spirits. But we don't want to make a change to their spiritual life, to their prayer practices, if they are in a state of spiritual desolation. Because when in spiritual desolation, those evil spirits can pull you to either trying to do too much for your state of life. So they can even make you feel like guilty for not going to daily mass when going to daily mass maybe is not realistic for your state in life. And going to daily mass, although a good, is taking you away from taking care of your children or providing for your family. So spiritual desolation can utilize even good things and pull you away from God. So rule number 5, never make a change in spiritual desolation, is referring to making sure that if you have consistencies in your prayer, which hopefully you do, and if not, send me an email. I would love to walk you through it. It is looking at not making a change. So it's this showing up, being aware that you are in spiritual desolation, understanding it, and then taking an action. So not changing your normal prayer routines, not changing the way that you would normally show up in your responsibilities, but this is going into a later rule, but taking action to either accept or reject this thought, this desolation, and then moving forward. Instead, what we are called to do is to change ourselves. So if your normal morning prayer is 15 minutes, you're going to fight the resistance to not show up for those 15 minutes, and instead you're going to pray for 16 minutes. You're going to do 1 extra minute, nothing extreme or extravagant, but you are just going to show up for 1 extra minute just to, kind of stick it to the evil one of, you know what, I am going to reject this desolation and I am going to continue to work with God and not against God. Changing yourself is something like getting coached, where you are having an outside observer help you to recognize your thoughts and to determine the trajectory of them so that you can accept or reject. When God seems really far away and your hearts are heavy, your perspective on what you are feeling and understanding that in prayer your feelings really don't matter because God works even when you don't feel great, even when it doesn't feel good, he is still there working. So it's accepting that and continuing to resist the desolation and petition and rely on the Lord to help you through it. Because we are all going to go through the highs and lows of spiritual consolation and desolation. Even the saints went through this. And it's just a pattern and a cycle. And there are reasons why the Lord allows us to go through desolation. Sometimes it's that we're lazy in our prayer lives or tepid. It might be to try us, or it might be to help us understand that it's through God that all things come, and it's an opportunity to lean on him and petition and grow closer to him. And again, the reason that we do this is because when we are in spiritual desolation and it feels like the Lord is distant from us, it feels like we're restless, we can't find peace, it might be really difficult for, even if you do show up in prayer, maybe you're going to, again, adoration, or you're doing your morning prayer routine or your nightly prayer routine, but you just feel constantly distracted and it's maybe hard to focus on God, like you're getting pulled into the past or you're getting pulled into the future, then this means that those evil spirits are the ones who are offering you those thoughts, and you can't make a good choice or positive judgment because they're going to lead you into confusion. In consolation, the good spirits guide and counsel us, but in desolation, it's often the bad spirits who are counseling us. And so it is difficult for us to make the right choice. So if you are trying to find out what does God want from me, where is he leading me, you need to ask yourself if you are in spiritual desolation. And something I want to add to this, I was recently on Jessica Castillo's A Thriving Catholic podcast, and we talked about bedtime and how important bedtime was. Not only for your physical health, but also for your spiritual health. A lot of times we can find ourselves in mental or physical desolation. So like overly tired, feeling exhausted, maybe we're sick and we're feeling yucky. That's just normal life stuff. But when we are in those places, we become much more vulnerable to spiritual desolation. Right now, my life is a perfect example of that. As some of you know, I have some health conditions, specifically GI related, and eating a food, even if it's something that I eat all the time, can throw me into several days of feeling just really yucky. And I'm currently off of a lot of my supplements because of a SIBO test that I have to take, and I'm doing a special type of fasting in order to take that test. And so the last couple of days, I've noticed it is so hard for me to get up for prayer. I am just exhausted. And in fact, 2 days ago, I only lasted 20 minutes. My head was hurting so bad. I just felt awful. And that I knew I just needed to rest and it was okay. But eventually it led to this spiritual desolation. And it took my meeting with my spiritual director yesterday to recognize that I really was in desolation. And that was a time to do a renunciation prayer, like I renounce or I reject. In the name of Jesus, I reject. In the name of Jesus, I accept. And even though I thought I had been doing that, I realized I wasn't necessarily rejecting all of the thoughts of discouragement that I was feeling. And by doing that and resisting, which Saint Ignatius also talks about, I was able to move out of that spiritual desolation and back into a place of consolation. Now that I'm in consolation, now I can make better decisions about how to move forward, about how God is asking me to be today, to serve today, and to grow today. So this is just a really important rule. And again, it's rule number 5, in spiritual desolation, never make a change. Okay, the last rule I want to talk about today is rule number 13, breaking the spiritual silence. This is huge. When we are in spiritual desolation, when we feel distant from God, when we feel discouraged, when we feel like we're worthless, like we're not good enough, like we can't do it, like maybe I have the wrong temperament, I wasn't really called for this, I don't know enough, all of those negative thoughts, the enemy's desire is for us to remain in secret and not be revealed. That's part of the rule here. And that's a problem. When we are in spiritual desolation, we want to retreat, and not retreat in a good way, but like withdraw from the people around us and from the world around us. It can lead us to being closed off. And so rule number 13 tells us that we cannot remain silent and isolated, but we should tell of our interior burden to an appropriate spiritual person. In doing so, we will be set free from the enemy's deceits. Again, I can witness the power of this from my own life, but you just have to do it for yourself to truly understand. And I see this not only in my own life, but in the clients that I am talking with and that I'm working with. Last night, I was working with a client. He was feeling really overwhelmed about some events that had happened that day. And in 23 minutes, we went through 2 thought cycles. And the look on his face and his body language went from being so utterly defeated to just like complete hope, complete surrender and trust in God. And that has nothing to do with me. That truly is the work of the Holy Spirit and us just providing the opportunity for the Holy Spirit to work. So when we are feeling those struggles, what we want to do is clam up and not share it. We might have intruding thoughts about how we will be a burden to other people or how we shouldn't put our worries and concerns on them. But these suggestive thoughts are really pulling us from what we are actually called to do, which is to share that interior burden with another person. Now, who is an appropriate spiritual person? It might be a spiritual director, but often you only meet with your spiritual director once a month, or many of you may not have a spiritual director. It could be your coach. So I'm a Catholic mindset coach. I have clients who we meet bi-weekly, or they can even just message me through an app called Slack. They can voice memo me or they can text and just say, I think I'm in desolation. And I will stop and I will pray with them and for them and send something back to them. And it's just telling someone what you are going through and asking them to pray for you. This should be someone that is on a spiritual journey of holiness. A priest is a good person. It can be a great friend as well, but you don't want to go to a gossipy friend who is in a state of mortal sin, who is not working toward holiness, because they are probably not going to be the best person to help you move forward. So, an appropriate spiritual person does not have to be a priest or a spiritual director, but it should be someone who is striving to work their way up the narrow path to holiness and to heaven. So just be mindful of who it is that you are talking to. Maybe it's your husband, maybe it's you call your sister. It could be anyone, and maybe it's as simple as sending a text message and saying, hey, I'm feeling some spiritual desolation. I'm feeling really defeated. Can you pray for me? Community is so essential. So with all of that, I could go on and on and on about this because I am so passionate. But I just want to remind you that discernment of spirits, it sounds like a lot of big words, but really it is about setting captives free. It is about growing in interior self-awareness so that you can have the freedom from discouragement and deception to make choices that are leading you to holiness and to know exactly where it is that God is calling you. It is growing and hearing His voice, the voice of the shepherd, whose voice should be louder than anyone else's, but it's often a soft whisper in the silence. So we have to make time, and this is a skill that we have to practice. Prayer is something that we have to practice. Prayer should be easy, but we often make it very difficult because we let all of the other noise intrude and keep us from Christ. All of this to say, I have something for you all that I'm so incredibly excited about. If you can't tell by my voice, I'm really, really excited. Starting on August 7th, I am going to be hosting a free book study on spiritual warfare and the discernment of spirits. So we are going to read a short book. It's just over 100 pages. So if you're like, I'm not a reader, I promise the words aren't super tiny. It's less than 100 pages. We're going to take 6 weeks to read this book. We are going to meet for 1 hour. I'm going to be honest, it's probably going to go over an hour because I get really excited. But an hour essentially for the book study portion, and then I'm going to offer free group coaching at the end of every session so that anyone who wants to experience the power of coaching and bringing that interior life into the exterior so that we can understand those thoughts and how God is working and look at the fruits of those thoughts and either accept or reject, that option and opportunity is going to be available. So this is going to start on Monday, August 7th. That is my birthday. So if you want to give me a really great birthday present, you are going to sign up for this book study. The book we are going to be reading is called Spiritual Warfare and the Discernment of Spirits by Dan Burke. This book is an introduction to the Discernment of Spirits book by Father Timothy Gallagher that I also talked about. I want to read to you a couple of things from the back of the book by Dan Burke. It talks about the battle for our souls is unavoidable. The saints won theirs by learning how to be spiritual warriors and by recognizing that we become stronger through battle and grow weaker from avoidance. With this book as your guide, you will grow in strength and contentment as you learn how to make every negative thought obedient to Christ. Saint Ignatius's revelation exposing how the devil seeks to influence us. The 3 principal causes of desolation and what you must do when it afflicts your soul. The paradigm of ascent and the 5 steps to sanctity. Side note, this is such a great piece, and I have taken a couple of classes by Dan, and I can elaborate on this piece. The 3 ways you can discern good spirits from bad spirits, and the proven methods for moving away from sin and towards self-giving in love of neighbor. Monday, August 7th at 6:30 p.m. Central is going to be our first session. I'm going to put a link in the show notes, or you can also just email me, info@kyliemhine.com, and just say, put me on your book list. You can reach out to me on Instagram, same thing. I actually had a post the other day where you could just leave a comment, and I will send you the information. We are going to go 6 weeks, every Monday at 6:30 p.m. Central. We will skip Labor Day. And on the last day, on September 18th, Dan Burke, the author of the book, is going to join us for a live Q&A via Zoom. If you know anything about Dan Burke, he is an incredible human being who is incredibly busy. I feel so incredibly blessed that he is willing to give up some of his time to meet with me and hopefully all of you. I don't want you to miss it. Please join us. It is going to be a fantastic way to grow in community. I can't tell you, just talking about this book, several people have this book, but it's been sitting on their shelves and they haven't read it. So this is an incredible way for you to finally read the book that's on your shelf or to get this book. I promise you it will help your spiritual life. All of Dan's books are really great, but this one is where we're going to start. I would love for you to join us. And again, if you haven't gotten your freebie on your daily temperament examen, again, based off of the work of Saint Ignatius of Loyola, go download it right now from kyliemhine.com, and I will see you all next time.